Welcome, everybody. So glad you're here today to learn about how states and districts are really leading the way with social emotional learning, and to hear, most importantly, about the outcomes that social emotional learning has been achieving for kids across the country. My name is Joan Duffell, and I'm Executive Director of Committee for Children, and I would like to thank especially Representative Tim Ryan of Ohio and Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut for their ongoing support of social emotional learning and policies that support educators in doing so. I want to just say briefly, Committee for Children is a nonprofit located in Seattle, Washington. We serve roughly a third of the schools and districts across the United States with evidence-based social emotional learning programs, bullying prevention, and child protection programming. And we focus on teachers, we focus on students, and we focus on parents. So we really think about this as a holistic approach in building kids' competence to be successful in school, and most importantly to us, to become better human beings. So we want to welcome you today to today's briefing, and you'll hear from both expert researchers in the field and from practitioners giving you that really, on-the-ground sense of how this walks and talks, what is social emotional learning, and how it's really advancing attainment for kids particularly across socioeconomic and demographic backgrounds. We think it's really important for Congress and federal advocates to hear firsthand what states and districts have already begun to push in American education. By the end of this briefing, after hearing their stories, we hope you'll agree with us that Congress should make SEL, social emotional learning training, a priority for training teachers in traditional and alternative prep programs when reauthorizing the Higher Education Act next year, that Congress should fund well-rounded education programs in Title IV, Part A, the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant in ESSA. So those are things that support social emotional learning. So we want to see that funding happen over the years. And that Congress should fund ongoing teacher and school leader preparation in Title II of ESSA to support social emotional learning. So we really feel strongly that teachers need a lot of support around this work, and I think after hearing from our speakers today, you'll understand why that support is so important and what a difference it can make in schools. So today, our presenters, let me get that slide up, are Dr. Roger Weissberg, the Chief Knowledge Officer of CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, Maisha Riddlesprigger, the principal of Ketchum Elementary right here in DC City Schools, Traci Davis, who is superintendent of Washoe County, Nevada School District, which is, think of it as Reno and around Reno, Nevada, Beth Herman, Beth, you're over here, thank you, Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, so she's going to talk about what they're doing at their state level, and Hanna Melnick of Learning Policy Institute. So, without further ado, I am going to introduce you to Roger Weissberg of CASEL, Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. Thank you, Roger.
Good morning. Ever since I was a little boy, I laid out my clothes the night before. So I give some thought to what I should wear. And so I put out a suit because it's respectful, a blue shirt and a red tie to emphasize that this is something for everyone. And in our presentation today, I think you're going to find that ESSA has unleashed innovation at the state level, at the district level, at the school level, which is a very important advance, I think, an opportunity for the country. And what we are trying to do today in our presentation is to have the voice of, at the school level, a principal, at the district level, a superintendent, at the state level, somebody working with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, and then someone from the Learning Policy Institute who's both a researcher but also thinks about connections to policy, implications for policy. So there is a method to what we want to accomplish to convey something that may not be well known, which is what's going on at local levels in this work. And then there are questions: if schools, districts, states are engaged in this work, what's the federal support that we need? And probably the most important thing that I can say is professional learning, professional preparation, and support is one of the key messages that will come across, I think, in the presentations. So I actually have two jobs. I've been a professor for 37 years and also worked with CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, since it was founded in 1994. So we're in our 23rd year right now. And a long time ago, in 1994, there were researchers, practitioners, child advocates who came together and kind of said, what are the active ingredients to help kids develop to their fullest optimal extent? And part of the view was we need to enhance their social, emotional, and academic growth. And another piece of this is, what are the social conditions, the climates that can support kids to be their best? So CASEL was founded, and we said social and emotional development is important, and we became the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And I would emphasize over the time, the important words in here, maybe for this presentation, are the C for collaborative. We work broadly with many groups and also learning. There's a learning agenda in this work. And we work to advance science, practice, and policy. Quickly, a definition of social and emotional learning. There's an emphasis on enhancing core competencies to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. The other part of this is how do schools and families and communities come together to create positive learning environments for kids. We emphasize in the work 5 competencies, which is a broad set of competencies: self-awareness and self-management, to know and understand yourself and your values; social awareness and relationship skills; feeling empathy, getting along with others; and then making responsible decisions about yourself and others. These are things that the research shows can be taught. And as we do the work at the school level, we think about what goes on in the classroom in terms of instruction, what goes on with school-wide policies and practices, and how to engage and partner with families and communities. There is a lot of research I could talk about. There have literally been hundreds of studies in the field that show that social and emotional learning, when implemented well, works at the preschool, elementary, middle, and high school, across urban, rural, and suburban contexts. There are programming efforts that have been run by school staff and teachers doing the work. There's a return on investment with SEL, an $11 return on $1 investment. A recent study from Columbia University showed, but it needs support. It needs leadership to do this work as well as possible. I'm going to just briefly mention that CASEL has a Collaborating Districts initiative. At this point, we work with 20 districts around the country doing this work. And Superintendent Davis will be one of the people who talks about the work that she does in Washoe County. But we have been doing this work for about 6 years, working with districts, both to understand what should be implemented, how it can be implemented effectively, and the work has been evaluated. Some of that's on our webpage. American Institutes for Research was the third-party evaluator for this work that is going on. When it came to a state's initiative, and with limited time, I'll just say we had planned originally to work with 5 states. Over time, now we're working with 20 different states across the country. Beth Herman's a representative of this work with our Collaborating States work from Wisconsin. But this work has been incredibly important to think about ways to establish policies to support schools and districts implementing this work well. This is just an example of some of the things going on, and I wanted to emphasize This is not necessarily a new concept in early childhood education. All 50 states in the country actually have social and emotional development standards. There are 7 states who have primary grade standards, preschool through 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade, and 4 states that have social and emotional competency standards from preschool to high school that specify what kids should know and be able to do. What's interesting as we're moving forward in the work, 29 states, you can see on this pie chart, still are focused on preschool standards. 4 states still have the pre-K to 12. Now we say that 5 states have pre-K to elementary standards, and that goes down from the 7 on the last slide because now there are 12 states actually actively working on pre-K to 12 social and emotional competence standards. So the main message that I want to give in all this work is there is a lot going on the ground in diverse states, in diverse districts, in diverse communities, rural, suburban, urban, red states, blue states, and I think to connect from the federal policy to the classroom is an important thing to take place. And I'll just end with one final statement. In the work we do interviews of states, how can you be helpful, and we do interviews with districts, how can states be helpful? And you'll see that the main message I think that comes across, and we've learned it, is each state is unique in terms of how they approach this work. They want to educate the whole child, they want to focus on intra and interpersonal competencies, but how they go about it, there needs to be a flexibility. And that flexibility needs to go to the local level as well. As we think about what kids should know and be able to do, what the curriculum and instruction should be, what the professional learning should be, what the assessments should be, that should be tailored, I think, very much at the local level. So my final comment is states can play an important role sharing valuable information about evidence-based work and also provide support for professional learning and create peer learning communities to advance the work. And policy support from Congress can help tremendously with that process. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Principal Maisha Riddlesprigger.
Yes.
And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Oh, I forgot that I put animation in this slide. Not necessary for this setting. But when you're a school leader, like that gets kids and teachers involved. So there's going to be some animation, excuse that. Everybody, I'm excited to be here today to talk about our journey in social emotional learning and our commitment to social emotional learning at Ketchum Elementary School. Those of you that are familiar with the DC area, which is probably most of us here in the room, my school, John H. Ketchum Elementary School, is located in historic Anacostia in Ward 8. So we are east of the river. Just a little bit of information about my school. We have a population of approximately 312 students at Ketchum Elementary School, and our racial demographics are, we're approximately 95% African American, 3% Hispanic, and 2% mixed race, which is generally Caucasian and African American. And 100% of our kids are identified as economically disadvantaged. And another statistic that not many people know about us is that we have approximately 15% of our students that are identified as homeless. And that rate has actually gone down since the 2013-14 school year when we were at 31%. So almost a third of our students identified as homeless. So looking at all of these statistics, one of the things you would think would be that our school would be performing as expected for schools with high instances of poverty and high instances of students of color in poverty. But I'm here today to talk about some exciting things that have happened at our school. We have, for the past 2 years, earned the Breakthrough Schools Award for Empower K-12. and that is for schools that are actually doing bold performance, or it's the Breakthrough Schools Bold Performance Award. And the bold performance indicates that we are actually defying statistics, and our students are performing at levels much higher than expected based on these demographics that you see here. So this year was our second year winning that award, the Bold Performance Award, and I'm here to talk a little bit about how our SEL journey has impacted that and helped us overcome some of the indicators of poverty that would suggest that our students would not perform at a high level. It's good. So I'm so embarrassed now. I was like, why didn't I take those out when I was doing it? Nobody wants to see that in this. So if we take a look at our journey, I became the principal of Ketchum Elementary School in 2013-14 school year. This was my second school in DC Public Schools and my fourth year as a principal, fifth year as an administrator at that time. When I came to Ketchum Elementary School, the student satisfaction rate the previous year was 73%. So every year, third through fifth graders are in essence given a survey to express their satisfaction with the school community, express their satisfaction with school safety, and express their satisfaction with cleanliness of the overall building. In DCPS, we use this as an indicator of student connectivity to their school, student joy about the school community, and as an indicator for us as administrators and staff and what we can do to improve. As you see, 73%. My first year there, we jumped from 73% to 87%. So I was extremely excited for our staff. But in the 2014-2015 school year, we started to notice a spike and increase in behaviors that we did not want to see in the school community. And I'll talk a little bit about those in the later slide. And as a result of that, some of our student satisfaction and safety measures decreased, not significantly, so we didn't go back down to 73%. However, we did reduce from 87% to 83%. So for us as a school community, we have a school climate team. We really wanted to know what were some of the things that were contributing to the decrease in our student satisfaction. Because at our school community, we know some of the external things that are going on in our school community, and we want our school community to be a safe space as well as one that students feel connected to, students feel satisfied and joyous about coming to every day. So it was that year that we decided to really focus on social emotional learning at Ketchum Elementary School and get everybody on board with what that meant. So we wanted to be clear that it wasn't just a program, it was a way of responding to student needs, especially students that have multiple adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, or students that have experienced trauma prior to entering into the school setting. So the 2015-2016 school year is the first year that we started to implement the Committee for Children's Second Step Social Emotional Learning curriculum, as well as focus on identifying trauma-informed practices for our students that could help teachers as well as our mental health team members that I'll talk a little bit about later. And what we saw was amazing. So obviously after we went down 3%, we were extremely excited to have our student satisfaction percentage raised from 84% to 94% that year after we made a solid commitment to social emotional learning. A solid commitment to not only training our students through our curriculum, but a commitment to training teachers to be more trauma responsive to students and their needs that included behavior. And then also, if you see last school year, our student satisfaction rate went up to 97%. So from 73% to 97%, we're extremely excited about that and extremely excited about the part that social emotional learning in the curriculum plays. So just to share with you our need, one of the questions we asked ourselves as a school community when we were thinking about this commitment to social emotional learning is how can we eliminate some of the barriers that impact sustained academic success within our school community. And as I said before, during the 2014-15 school year, after which we adopted this commitment to social emotional learning, we actually saw a decrease in 3% of student satisfaction, and that school year an increase of 20% in office referrals, so student behaviors that did not meet behavior expectations. And some of the most common behaviors were pushing, shoving, physical contact. So we're not talking like knockdown, drag out fighting, but students just not knowing how to manage their anger. So you make me mad, you looked at me wrong, I pushed you, I shoved you, there was physical contact that was inappropriate. We also looked at reckless behavior, so things, students just not being safe. Part of our PBIS matrix, the S for SOAR stands for safe, so students just not being safe. Destruction of property, so students not knowing how to manage their anger, so they would like rip up paper and throw it on the ground, or like write on a desk because they were just angry and didn't know how to manage those emotions, or students leaving the assigned area without permission. All of these behaviors that we were seeing stemmed from anger and students not knowing how to manage that anger or frustration in the classroom. So why social emotional learning for us? We did a lot of research and partnering with an organization, Turnaround for Children, and did a lot of research and training for our teachers on trauma-informed care and how to respond to students that have experienced multiple ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. So those things include divorce, drug abuse of parent, incarceration of parent, molestation, rape. Many of our students in our school community had not only experienced one of those things, which any one of us here can, especially divorce, things that are more common in our society, but many of the students that were coming to us were experiencing multiple ACEs and mental health issues and challenges that had gone unresponded to. And so what we also noticed is that our students were not equipped with a toolkit of soft skills, as we like to call them, to help them manage these emotions in times of crisis. And our school community had many students, as I said before, with those ACEs that negatively impact their school performance as well as the school culture and climate. When we assessed our students that year that we decided to focus on social emotional learning, of our approximately 300 students at that time, we noticed that 65 students of those 300 were identified as in need of severe social emotional support. So not just minor social emotional, not a few counseling sessions, but severe. Why social emotional learning? We also looked at the research, and there was a research survey conducted by EdWeek that said that 57% of people and educators said that preparation programs had not adequately prepared them to deal with the challenges of students. And then we also knew that we as a school community had to fill in that gap and take on that responsibility to train and support people and educators and professionals that were working with students. So very quickly, I will just say our solution is we decided as a school community to incorporate a school-wide social emotional learning curriculum. The social emotional learning time and curriculum time was specifically built into the master schedule, so we didn't leave it up to chance. We deliberately made this a part of our school as we would reading, writing, guided reading, social studies. We also provided small group and individual counseling services using the second step as a curriculum for our students in severe needs, so those 65 students that we identified as in need of severe support. And we tracked student progress and strategy use over time. And we trained and invested teachers and support staff in the benefits of social emotional learning. And I included this next graphic, just to show that the SEL approach in our school is not just a teacher approach, it's not just a principal approach, it is a collaborative approach. So you'll see on the left side, our mental health team and the members of that, which include our social worker, psychologist, Department of Behavioral Health clinician, and our community collaborative liaison. And you'll see our second step curriculum and teachers, staff members, school climate team, as well as parents, which are all very integral parts in ensuring that that curriculum is delivered. I don't know if I'm running over time, so I'm gonna cut it short here, but I do have information about stories of impact of some of our students, and I'll keep this up and you can read through it, but I will say that we've seen some significant changes in student behavior, as well as students' ability to manage emotions, and we feel that now we're just at a place as a school community where the conditions for success are there in order for us to make sure that our students are primed and ready to receive instruction. Thank you.
Thank you. Principal Riddlesprigger is an amazing principal who has taken a systemic approach to social and emotional learning. For a commercial announcement, I wanted to say that Civic Enterprises and Peter Hart have just done a national survey of principals where part of their finding is that 95% of principals think that social and emotional learning should take place in their schools. This is a nationally representative sample, and the report's going to come out I think on November 7th. It will be released. Also, CASEL, on our webpage, we were funded by the Wallace Foundation to develop a district resource center, which part of the arrangement is people can just download examples of for free of how to do this work and what leaders across the country who are doing this work have done in their districts. And speaking of leaders in districts and things that they've done, Superintendent Traci Davis from Washoe has been a fantastic collaborator over the years on system-wide SEL in Washoe County, Nevada.
Good morning. Thank you, Roger. Roger started his speech out with his social awareness, and he had colors on for something for everyone. I kind of was in self-awareness, and I was going to wear black to look thin if they were filming this thing, right? So you have to use these competencies across many venues. But honestly, today I'm so proud to be here on behalf of Washoe County School District and what we're doing with our 64,000 students. We're located in Reno, Nevada. It's northern Nevada. We believe to the core every child by name and face to graduation. And while that might be a simple mission statement, it encompasses a lot because we believe the road to graduation starts at pre-K. We believe that these SEL skills start at pre-K all the way through their journey in education. So today I want to talk a little bit. I don't want to talk about your stories. Wait a second. I want to talk about my stories. Oh, you would do it for me? That's usually how it works at work, too. Somebody does it for me. So I want to talk about, I think the most important thing for us when we think about this work is our strategic plan. And remember, I work with a board of trustees, and we have embodied this, and you see this work and this dedication around SEL and our strategic plan. And that's our guiding document in which we believe will get us to the finish line for all of our students. Needs and resources and assessments. One of the things, we have an accountability department, and they did an intensive research on what was happening in our schools and what was already working. And as we looked at what was working, what would be meaningful, and what were areas in which we could have improvement. And by doing this, this allowed us to develop SEL standards as a foundation of a district-wide implementation. And I was sitting here thinking about the principal here, and I've been a former principal, thinking about, yes, a principal, how you do that in a school. It's kind of, you can own that, but at large systems, we have over 100 schools, 64,000 students, 8,000 employees. And so as we talk about this work around social emotional learning, it's not just for teachers, it's not just for kids, it's for everybody in the organization. When we looked at our plan for sustainability, integration of SEL standards meant that the language and the competencies are present not only in academics, but also in social problem solving and in discipline. It also means that it is a present part of our professional development plan, and not that it's just seen at schools. As I said, that it should be happening at central office. And I'll tell you a great quick story. I was actually visiting schools, and we use Mind Up in our elementary schools, and there's a part where they take a little time, they hear a chime, and they have to self-reflect, right? So I'm doing work in the third grade class. I'm the superintendent. I'm keeping on schedule. They chime, and what do? I get ready to go, and the little girl says, "Lady, you're supposed to stop and reflect right now," right? But I think that's meaningful, right? Because it's not teacher-driven to the sense where the teachers say it happens. The kids own it, and they are actually using those essential skills, right, as they go through life. And it really made me think, wow, we teach this to kids, and as adults, sometimes we forget to take a moment and reflect. And it was one of the proudest moments I had in my district, because as district, we talk about all the work we do, right? But evidence and return on that investment is when you actually see students employing those strategies. And that's just one of many stories we have. So when we look at district-wide implementation, we talk about all of our 100 schools, which include our pre-K students all the way to our high school students. We talk about central office and how they support those strategies. And here's a great one for you. We talk about bus drivers, we talk about the lunch lady, we talk about the gardener, because remember, the first person who sees a student might not be the teacher, right? And if we believe this is important enough for kids, we should believe it's important enough for each and every individual in our organization. One of the parts that we work on with SEL is why is this so important for teachers to be able to implement SEL with fidelity, right? Not kind of like do it over here, do it over there. They need district support. There has to be support from the top, right? And so we want to make sure they have access to high quality professional learning as they go about and employ strategies for our students. Paid, dedicated, set aside time for them to do this professional learning, to talk about what they're seeing, to talk about what's working, what's not working, because we believe that collaboration is an important integral part of that, and teachers need time for that. But that requires a fiscal commitment. Staff also needs to commit from the districts and the SEL priority that says, hey, we know this is a value to our kids, but what does it mean as far as a return on investment? And as I continue through this, I'm going to show you some amazing data around the return on investment, in which it is really, really incumbent on all of us to think about how we financially support this. Implementation model? Oh, you were ahead of me. Hold on, there you go, yep. So schools, so we use the trainer of the trainer model, site-based, with our SEL leadership teams. We are a large district, as I said, with 4,000 teachers, so the other 4,000 employees are different support staff. So we have developed a site-based leadership team in each school. So each school has a support mechanism within it, so they don't have to call the district office on Monday and say, hey, I need somebody to come out if they're struggling. The support is built right in. When we look at our SEL standards, and they are our foundation for all the work that we do, it is so important, because when we talk about the collaboration of academics, and we talk about climate and culture, we talk about curriculum, how do they all work together to get kids to the finish line? Because we believe we want kids to be ready, whether they're going to college, a highly skilled career, or the military. These essential skills will help them be productive. When we talk about our education support professionals, there's a wonderful story we have of a bus driver doing this work with her special education students, right? Because part of this work, sometimes we go, well, this is for these kids and not for those kids. I believe everything we do that's good for kids, for every kid, whether they're an English language learner, whether they're a special education student, whether they're African American, whatever it is, if it's good for kids, then every kid should be exposed to this. And one of our bus drivers attended some training, and she started employing some of those skills, and we highlighted her in a Friday Minute, because part of it is the work that you do should be out to the community. So we send this information out to our community also, and our community is getting involved. And I'm going to talk about a few pieces around. We offer social emotional learning conferences in our community. Once a quarter in the evening, we have a 4-hour offering with keynote speakers and breakout sessions. And listen to this, it started more as a district thing. It has expanded such that we provide dinner for our families. We have sure that there's child care, because we don't want any barriers for our families when they come to this. We also offer parent university. This year we offered over 60 courses on the topics of what is social emotional learning and fostering resiliency in your child. We know that kids need to be resilient, and they need to have grit as they embark on their journey. For staff to implement this well, SEL needs to be a national priority for us. It needs to be found in teacher education, in our colleges and universities. States need to develop standards and support implementation and funding streams beyond grants, and needs to occur. Because think about when you come out of school, and I tell a wonderful story about my first year teaching. I came out and I thought it was gonna be so fabulous, because I had all those methods classes, and then there's a kid sitting in front of you who didn't eat. There's a kid sitting in front of you whose mom is in jail, right? As a teacher, I wasn't necessarily equipped with the necessary skills to address their needs, because the basic needs have to be taken care of before they care about reading, before they care about math. And these things need to happen on a national level, because we know we have kids that are, like she talked about, trauma, right? And what are those skill sets we need to have as they come out of teaching college, right? Beyond methods classes, they are paramount in us having an excellent body of students being ready for the workforce. As we look at Fortune 500 companies, the U.S. Department of Labor are calling for our youth to have social and emotional competence. They want interpersonal skills, self-management, the ability to respectfully disagree while maintaining a positive working relationship. Everybody in this room works with somebody that hasn't agreed with them, right? But we need to be able to do that in a constructive manner. We need to teach those skills, and those skills start at kindergarten. Give me the ball. No, whack. No, that's not what we do, right? If you go into an elementary school, you talk about it. How do we share? But those are the skills you have to start on early. I want to show you a little graph of our data, because I know I'm running out of time. When you look at the dark blue on this data, this is when we fully implemented our social emotional learning program in Washoe County School District. Now, I'm not going to say a lot, just look at this. I'll tell you, look at the 60s. This year, we recorded a record high graduation rate of 84% for the first time in history in Washoe County School District. But even bigger, which I can't get in time to this, we closed achievement gaps, right? So you can make the graduation rate go up. But if you're not closing achievement gaps with students with disabilities, English language learners, minority subgroups, then what's the purpose of raising the gap? Because that means you're only helping the same old kids. We get to stand tall and proud this year and say, we have closed gaps for every subgroup of students. And so we have this model, yes, every child by name and face to graduation, but we believe we can get to a 90% graduation rate by the year 2020. And we call it 90 by 20. So if you go on our webpage, you'll look at it. It's 90 by 20, every child. And 90 by 20 means they have the essential skills when they exit us to be able to survive in society, have the academics necessary to whether they want to go to college or the military or a highly skilled career. But we look at data, because part of it is people going, okay, that's great. Well, what does the data say about our kids? So we've looked at data. Our students scored higher in math and reading in the 15-16 SBAC test. That means students are scoring higher. And not only do we have higher rates of graduation, we have higher rates of attendance. What we see by students reporting is they come to school because not only can they employ the skills, teachers can employ the skills. They feel like they are building relationships with their teachers and the teachers understand them. So now we're getting a higher rate of attendance. When you have a higher rate of attendance, that means kids are in the classroom, which means kids are doing more learning. So there should be a return on investment in that. We are super excited about this work, and I really, really want you to go on our webpage and look at the data, and we're very transparent about it. We're super excited about the work that's happening in Washoe. And I just want to close with a story from one of our high school students who shared it in a large forum. She was talking about she went to work and she had a bad day, and she said there was an angry customer. And she said out loud, we were like, well, you don't know this is happening. She goes, but I remember the skills taught in my class on how to deal with angry customers, and all of a sudden I had the skills equipped to handle that customer and do my job. I think it speaks volumes around the work that we're doing for children, because not only do we need them to be academically ready, we need them to be socially ready to employ these skills as they go on to their journeys in society. Thank you.
So think if you're a classroom teacher and you have a principal like Principal Riddlesprigger, and you have a superintendent like Superintendent Davis, the support, the systemic support for this work is incredibly important. And again, it's something that's going on around the country. We're going to skip over states for 1 second because I see that Congressman Tim Ryan is in the room. Congressman Ryan has been an amazing champion for this kind of work nationwide, and also in Youngstown, where they're doing extraordinary, Youngstown, Ohio, where they're doing extraordinary work. So it's good to see you, Congressman.
I hate when I come to these, and I say in our family, like, we don't say hate, so I get up to the podium and I say hate. Nice job, Congressman. Because I come and I listen. I always come a little bit early and I get to listen and I hear what's going on, and I just want to say how absolutely inspirational you are to me as a legislator, just trying to help you push this stuff out. And Roger, I can't thank you enough. I'm so excited about this. It's weird to be in Washington for a variety of reasons right now. But and the fact that you all laughed at that, I think, speaks volumes as to where we are. But those of us who are in Wisconsin or Reno or actually working in schools in D.C. or somewhere else, there is so much going on outside in the country, you know, and I call it like a quiet revolution that's actually happening. And there are so many positive things, and when I see what's happening in Reno, and I look and the same things happening in Warren City schools in my congressional district in eastern Ohio, northeastern Ohio, I get excited about the possibilities of pushing this out. And when I saw Parent University, my God, that's like a genius. It's a genius to do it, and it's so important to do it, but to call it Parent U, because I, as a parent, my wife and I, we have a 14-year-old boy. That's a whole therapy session that we all need. We have a 13-year-old girl, Bella, Mason and Bella, and they're phenomenal kids. And then we have a 3.5-year-old, Brady. They're phenomenal kids, but the struggle is like the technology, the amount of information that they're getting today, the income inequality that you're dealing with in the schools and our schools everywhere. It's so hard, and I think for us to come collectively and say, look, it's okay for us not to really understand quite how to handle this, but here's what the research is telling us, and here's how the social and emotional skills help, and here's what's going on with their amygdala and their prefrontal cortex, and to say, look, here's how we, got to come together and teach each other on how best to do it, because literally, our country in some sense is hanging in the balance here, whether or not we actually figure this out. And I love the story about transitioning that out into work, because it's really just very, very important. I just want to be quick because I want you to get back to what you're doing here. I am deeply committed to this. One of the last, we used to have earmarks in where you can congressionally direct spending. And one of the last ones I got was for $1 million to go to Youngstown and Warren City Schools to do social and emotional learning, and working with CASEL and Linda Lantieri. And I will just tell you this, Youngstown City Schools has had its ups and downs. They've been through about a bunch of superintendents, and the state came in, and they're dealing with their issues now, but they're moving in this direction, as well as with healthy food. And Warren, where there has been a consistent social and emotional learning program for 5 years now, and this is the only thing that has sustained itself through 5 different superintendents, was the SEL program. When it started 5 years ago, they had 248 out-of-school suspensions in like K through 3 or 4. Last year was 20. So talk about just butts in the seats. Step one, you got to be in the classroom or you're not going to learn anything. And then, move on from there. And I went to their kickoff. The day they had the band come, and we were all in the gym, and it was the first day of school for the teachers, and the place was packed. And if you read the newspaper in Trumbull County or Warren, Ohio, and you hear about the opiate epidemic, and you hear about the income inequality and the factories closing, all of that, you have one perception of the community. And if you were there that day, these teachers were so enthusiastic. Who teach, like McGuffey School, stand up McGuffey, and they're up and they're cheering, and they're, okay, where's Jefferson Elementary? Jefferson, they started cheering. It was so, I got emotional. I was like, how do we bottle this and go outside this gymnasium that we're in and show the community what's happening in these schools right now? It's incredible, the revolution that's happening in Warren City Schools. And so I was talking to the superintendent, Steve Chero, who does a phenomenal job in just driving it. The leadership from the superintendent is incredible when this is being successful. He says, this has helped our teachers more than our kids. I mean, my wife was a 4th grade teacher, now she's a 1st grade teacher, so periodically all the teachers come over to the house. Occasionally a bottle of white wine gets opened, and the congressman gets a town hall meeting on education, unvarnished. I'm like, okay, I think I've got to go somewhere right now before you get into that second bottle of white wine. But we get a real sense of what's happening in our house, and this is it. I'm not saying this is a silver bullet. You need to wrap around services. You need after school. You need summer school. You need fresh and healthy foods in the schools. Diet's a huge part of this. But I just want to say to all of you, if you work here in town, this is a bipartisan effort. We had Tim Shriver come, and he spoke to Youngstown City Schools a few months ago, and he just laid this out, and the teachers were very inspired about what's happening. We've got to get this message out, because this is working. The stats are here, the research is here, the personal stories are here. We have enough superintendents now to tell these stories from a leadership perspective. We're seeing the difference in the kids. We're seeing the difference in scores, so we just got to keep pushing this out. There are answers to the challenges, you know, and I mean, President Kennedy said it, our problems are man-made, and they can be solved by man. We've created all this stuff, you know, the technology, the societal, the culture, this, that. We've all done that, not always intentionally, but we have. So it's our job to try to make it right. And I think doing this in our schools and our after-school programs and our Boys and Girls Clubs and all the other ancillary groups that can help piece this thing together is critically important for us to change the trajectory of the country. That's what we're doing, and that's how I stumbled into this, just to say, look, we're not going to change the neighborhoods in Warren until we change the schools, until we get kids leaving the school and going out into the neighborhood and de-escalating situations because of the tools that they learn in the schools. That's what this is all about. And you know, we've had, in 2016, 4,000 opiate overdoses and deaths in Ohio. In 2016, and 4,000. The opiate epidemic, there's 60,000, I think, last year that died, last year or 2 years ago. It's like a Vietnam War every year happening. And I share this with you because when we visited a school in Warren a few weeks back, the principal was just telling us, you know, last year there were 7 parents in this school who OD'd. And so you think, wow, this is terrible. 7 people died and their family and everything else. And then you think, well, then 7 of these kids are in the same school and what that does to the school. And to give these kids the kind of tools that they need to deal with that severe incident, but also the kind of the daily grind of gangs and violence and domestic violence and all the things. This is it, guys. I mean, and we've got to just keep plugging away. So I'm very thankful, Roger, for your leadership and everybody in CASEL and what you're doing. And we just got to keep plugging away, because once people hear about this quiet revolution that's happening, I think it begins to change the country. Thank you so much.
I'm always so inspired by the congressman, and I just want to pull one thing that he said out and shine a light on it. Social and emotional learning began really as focusing on students, but in every district we work in, the focus now is on students and adults, the whole community, and providing supports in a variety of ways. So this is something, again, these competencies, the relationships need to be done with a lifespan developmental orientation. The other thing I'll say is the congressman always has amazing staff. And I just learned that Catherine Wenzel, a leading scholar, I think, in the world with motivation, with social development, how to work with families, how to work with schools in this work, has joined your staff for a year. And this is the year we have to do something. There are thousands of schools across the country. There are many districts. There are states on board. Ohio is even one of the collaborating states that we're working with. There are 20 states we're working with. This seems to be a year where something could be introduced and advanced in a bipartisan way. We have red states and blue states involved with the work, districts that are in red and blue states, and if there's something we can do, I think this is the year to do it, really. So, thank you.
We're obviously taking the lead on it, and if there's anybody, so Kathy, raise your hand here. That's why I sound so smart, right? Well briefed. If you know of a Republican that would be interested in taking this, okay, we can laugh, fine.
Fred Upton.
It's Fred's leaving now, I think.
No.
No?
21st century.
Tell Fred. Fred's a great guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's on
So
the big
think.
Let's
Democrats,
do it.
Republicans.
Okay.
Just because they don't say it on TV doesn't mean they can't do something. Thank you.
Great. Next, we have Beth Herman from Wisconsin. And again, we're working with 20 states, but Wisconsin is one of the states doing great work.
Good morning. I am just a lifelong educator getting to present on something I'm passionate about in a Senate meeting room in Washington, D.C., and I'm very honored to be here, so thank you. States have been really late to this party. You've heard from the local perspective, you've heard from the district perspective. I'm an educator for over 20 years, trained as a school psychologist, and I did the work at the local level. And I remember at one point we contacted the State Department that I now work for and said, who's your point person on social emotional learning? And they said, huh? It's happening. It was happening among the counselors, the guidance counselors. It was happening among the other support staff like social workers and school psychologists, but there wasn't any broad, coordinated effort at the state level. Well, now I'm there and I get to do the work. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about what we're doing. It's a work in progress. We are not nearly as far along as the ladies that spoke to you before, but I think that I can sort of give you an idea about the 3,000-foot view, because we're not just looking at how do we support 100 schools or how do we support 350 kids. We're looking in Wisconsin about how do we support over 400 school districts. So one of the things that happened, there was a number of perfect storm elements that occurred. And in 2013, we received a grant with our friends at the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, my friends who came to support me today. And the Safe Schools, Healthy Students grant did a couple things that really set the tone for this. One of them, and Roger mentioned this when he spoke, is about the collaboration. The grant required us to develop a collaborative state group to drive the work. And if you take anything away from this today about a state perspective, I would ask that you take that back, that this cannot be done by schools alone. When we're talking about social emotional learning, we are not talking about just social emotional learning. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about AODA. We're talking about trauma-sensitive schools. It's all part of the same page. So these were all of our state partners that we convened for that project, for that grant project. It gave us money to do this. I'd love to say that this work is so important we could do it all without funding, but that's not true. You all know that. And one of the requirements was that we do a very comprehensive needs assessment, and we did that in our state management team, as it's called, that has state agencies, advocacy groups, parent representation, county representation, local school district representation, identified that we had a gap because we lacked benchmarks, developmentally appropriate benchmarks for social and emotional learning, for both parents and staff. And so that's notable to tell you, because they recognized we've got early childhood folks involved. They said parents don't always know what is an appropriate expectation for social emotional learning benchmarks. So we created a work group to start to drive the work, and that was in 2013. Between 2013 and 2015, we also received a number of other federal grants. And one of the things that's important to know about that is we were strategic about how we were going to utilize those grants, so they weren't separate things going on, that we were doing the same type of work with that funding. And then in 2015, we became part of the CASEL Collaborating States Initiative. And just a little story about that. I mean, I don't know if I even need to tell you the resources and the access that we get by being part of that collaborative. Every state is different. We are a totally local control state, so what might work for us is probably not what they're going to decide to do in Rhode Island or what they're going to decide to do in Nevada. But we get access to talk about different challenges and resources and ideas, and every time we've met, I've come back with something. But this is kind of interesting. When we started doing the work and we started taking out the benchmarks, and I'll tell you a little bit about the process that we did, we started showing these to folks and saying, give us feedback. And the counselors and the psychologists and the social workers said, is this aligned with CASEL? We could say that, CASEL, you guys actually gave us credibility with our staff, because they were doing this work already on their own. When the state wasn't doing it, when we weren't doing any coordination of anything here, they were moving forward on their own. They found CASEL, and they wanted to know that we were sticking with the plan. So you guys gave us credibility in addition to everything else. The other thing that happened is, as all of this was going on, there has been a big push in Wisconsin, and it's bipartisan. So when we're talking about bipartisan, I think one of the ways that we actually get bipartisan support for this is to frame this in the bigger picture. We talk about SEL because that's a specific piece of this, but we are talking about student mental health, and we're talking about student wellness in general. And this is our Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction vision, and what's important to note is this is the first time that any state Department of Education vision from Wisconsin includes a notation about looking at student mental health. Our focus has always been on academics, And because of the work that we've been able to do, we've been getting the support, the exceptional support of our state superintendent, Dr. Tony Evers, and now it's become part of the language. In Wisconsin, we're not likely to do any legislative policy changes. It's a little bit of a political thing, but this to me is a policy change in and of itself. Not official, but it's saying to people in schools that we recognize that teaching the whole child is what's important, that it's not just your reading and math scores on tests. This is part of that as well. We also then, through bipartisan support, got funding to address mental health issues in the state of Wisconsin for the first time ever. Very excited about that. So what we decided to do with all of these grants and all of this work is nest it together. Because you can't have teachers thinking there's, am I right? There's one more thing you're asking me to do in this classroom, and I don't have time to do what you're already asking me to do now. So we created a school mental health framework in Wisconsin a few years back, and you see where that white circle is? Got your reading glasses out? One of the universal supports, because we're also a multi-tiered systems of support state, is that rich social emotional learning is essential to student wellness. So as part of a mental health framework, this stuff doesn't function independently. You'll also notice on their trauma-sensitive schools. So we have a whole initiative that does trauma-sensitive schools. We've got an online training modules, a number of them, and one of them is specifically about social emotional learning and trauma. The people that created that have been involved in our social emotional work group creating the competencies. So we're pulling PBIS and all of those folks together because it's really important as part of, as I said, schools can't do this alone, but this has to be a very coordinated message to staff to see that we're not asking them to do one more thing that's going to disappear in 2 years if they just wait it out, right? That this is part of a whole approach that we're taking to change the way that we're dealing with students and families. Because the other piece of this is that these resources are really pretty meaningless if we don't engage the families and bring them in. They're part of that community. So what we decided to do when we took a look at, so here's the meat of it, right? We decided to do these competencies. We're calling them competencies. Roger will tell you every state is dealing with this in a different way. We knew that the term standards, for a couple of reasons, could be kind of problematic when it doesn't always have such a good recognition. But also because we didn't want these to be perceived by people in the field, families, to be yet one more proficiency task to check off if a student does it or not. So the competencies are not the same as a standard. This isn't where we're going to say, you know, this school has 40% of their kids proficient in social emotional learning. We don't want to go there. This is an additive model. So we convened this work group, and Roger had indicated to you that every state has early learning standards. Ours are called the Wisconsin Model Early Learning Standards, or WEMLs, which I've been told the folks who created don't like that acronym, but it's just easier, really. So the WEML standards were picked up then by a local school district, the Madison Metropolitan School District, and they created a number of years ago standards for their district. When we started looking at this work and looking at the states that were already doing it, there weren't many, and none of the ones that were there actually kind of fit with what we thought was going to be the culture of Wisconsin. So we started with the local, and one of the things you should know is that the WEMLs does not use the 5 CASEL competency areas. And we had discussions about, do we switch so that it fits with CASEL, but we wanted to maintain our WEML structure because teachers are already using it for children up to 6 years old, so we didn't want to change that. So what we ended up doing is, on the standards, you can't see this here, but it has a column in which it identifies which CASEL competency our benchmark addresses, so that we can tell people all 5 of CASEL's competencies are addressed in these benchmarks. Another thing that we did that you don't see on here because this slide was a little bit older is that we changed these, and now we're calling them pre-K to adult. Because we did a lot of focus groups. This was my experience too, but I can't go doing this work just based on what I think, right? So we went out and we did focus groups, and at every focus group, an educator said to me, okay, well, what about the adult skills? Because I'm working with people here that are not showing very good social emotional skills. What do we do about that? And we do know that kids learn from modeling. So we now call these through adult. We also recognize that this is a lifelong learning skill. And I think it makes the people that are doing the work have to own it a little bit more than saying this is for them, this is for all of us. We have done it by grade bands. We have people on the group that are also part of universal design. So we're looking at how we present these in a more developmental level for folks who want to do that. The special ed folks are particularly interested in that sort of presentation. But we do know that teachers are used to working in grade band sorts of work, so we did that. And these are not mandated. Wisconsin, as I said, is a local control state. So all of this work that we're doing, it's not to mandate anybody do anything. We aren't going to be collecting data. In fact, I wish I could tell you, like, these ladies have been able to give you some fabulous data, which I'm going to steal. But we can't share any state data with you because we don't collect it. We're only allowed to collect what we are allowed to collect through legislative fiat. So these will not be required, but we are hoping the feedback from the field is that they're really excited about these. They want this information. People are already rolling with our draft. We have put it out for 2 public reviews. We've had CASEL review it a number of times. And we are now at the point where we are starting to put it into the publishing format. So we're hoping to have it accessible as an official branded document from the Department of Public Instruction by the end of the year. But that's not all that we can do, and that's not all we should be doing. So we are working on, and I'm going to skip that one, we are working on a number of support resources. We've contracted with our UW Extension Agency to create some parent resources online and some resources that schools can share with parents. We really wanted to make sure that the parent resources that we had were something that we gave to schools to share with parents. Do you know what I'm saying? Because that's part of that parent-school engagement. They don't need to engage with the State Department. They need to engage with their local community schools. So that's part of what that was about. We're working on online training modules. For those of you, I'm going to plug the state of Washington, just posted their online training modules. They're accessible to anybody who wants to see them. We're hoping to do something similar. What we hear from the field when we go out there is administrators and teachers both tell us they did not feel that they had adequate preparation to deal with the things that are now before them in classrooms. You guys experienced this yourself. And I think that these mental health issues, the behavioral issues are escalating to the point that people don't feel that they can do this. High school teachers say, don't ask me to do anything with emotional. I'm not here for emotional stuff, I'm here for math. So one of the teachers' feedback was, when you frame this with high school teachers, call this employability skills because you'll get more support from them. So we've been doing that. We've been looking at how we frame this. The way that we might frame this to our legislature, the way that we might frame this to our high school staff might be more similar than you think. And so we've been really very conscientious about that. I shared one of our communication tools that we created that districts can pull off the website. They can put their own school district logo in there if they want. We're aligning this with our academic and career plans, which is something that all middle and high school students have to complete. I think it's also another way to pull this into the high school realm in a way that will be a little bit more palatable for high school teachers. They're going to be the more difficult sell, I think. Not because they don't think it's important, but because their plate is incredibly full. With over 130 kids a day, it's pretty difficult sometimes. So there are a number of resources that we are creating to support that work. We have a website. I encourage you, it's on that sheet that we provided, to see what's there. I will tell you it's a little messy. And we're working to get an improved, nicer, more accessible site, but we're somewhat limited by our current state software. But one thing I do want to say is that we are doing a lot of focus on adult SEL. And this is a little tricky because you can't go out and tell adults, your social skills aren't so good, maybe you ought to do something about that, right? So CASEL does, I don't know if it's been actually published yet, but they've given us access to a self-assessment that adults can use. And then there's another one through the Center for Healthy Minds, which is out of Madison with Richie Davidson, Dr. Davidson. Both are tools that adults can use to sort of assess where they are in their social emotional development. The one from CASEL is actually in the 5 areas. What we've been encouraging staff to do is that as they use these, that they develop professional learning communities around this topic, and that they can use these self-assessments to start some conversations with one another. I firmly believe that for a lot of adults, they have the skills, but they don't have the protective factors in place to access them and genuinely use them. So part of our efforts at the state in a bigger, broader context is looking at the wellness of our staff. Because if people don't feel safe themselves, they're going to have a very hard time connecting with the kids and being able to model those skills as well. So there's a lot of work. I could keep talking. I think I'm probably close to done. But, you know, all of us, I think, are pretty open to answering any questions you might have.
I hope so. We have one more speaker, and then we... Okay, so moving ahead, I just say in an era of ESSA, you can see that what has been unleashed is incredible creativity at the state and local level, and our big focus at CASEL over the next bunch of years is to think more about the pathways that states and districts can take supporting each other to support quality work in schools, but always with a scientific base. And that leads us to Hanna Melnick, who's going to bring back a little science and policy into the final equation.
Great, thank you, Roger. And I am speaking both about research and policy. I'm Hanna Melnick from the Learning Policy Institute. We are a nonpartisan think tank that elevates high-quality research directly for people like you, policymakers. So I think a lot of the research has already been cited, and the stories speak for themselves. So I will just say that we can be a resource to you if you want a synthesis of a great deal of the research, but I want to make sure we get to what you can do. So the research does show that SEL can be taught both in the schools, the classrooms, and by families in the community. And that high-quality research, high-quality programs have really powerful impacts, both in students' academic life and beyond. So high-quality programs can lead to higher academic achievement, to higher graduation rates, safer schools, preventing bullying. They lead to less teacher stress, which is important. If you have teacher shortages in your state, which I bet you do, this can keep teachers in the classroom. And improve college and career-ready skills. And these are achievement gains that last for a long time. Studies show that as much as 15 years out, you're still seeing the benefits, which is what leads to that return on investment that was mentioned, the $11 return for every dollar spent. And I'll just say briefly that research does show that teachers matter greatly for students' SEL. In fact, sometimes some studies show that they may even have a greater impact on students' mindsets and the way they perceive themselves and others as they do on their academic competence. This extends both from teachers' social and emotional competence, which research shows has a very big influence on students. They are role models. Up through the classroom environment that was described earlier, to the explicit teaching of SEL. And school and district leaders are so critical in making sure that students and teachers are supported for this learning. So we are leaving an era from No Child Left Behind, which really focused on academic test taking and bubbling in the answers on tests. And you see in this picture here, that's when I was a teacher. This is what school was like. We now need to make a shift. We need to think about how we can make classrooms more collaborative, more engaging, so that students are working with each other and they're taking agency. So what can we do to make sure we are shifting our mindset? It's going to take teacher preparation and teacher training. A scan of teacher preparation programs across the country show that even though schools of education have a focus, or supposedly have a focus on student social and emotional development, they are not actually teaching it in their core courses. So teachers are walking into the classroom without the skills, as was mentioned earlier. They are not equipped to deal with all of the students' needs and to know how their teaching should reflect the social and emotional development of the students. We also really need to make sure we're focusing on in-service teacher preparation, because we have, again, needing to make this shift, we need to take our teacher preparation programs, not just focusing on math and reading, but what can teachers do in their teaching practices to support SEL? And just as a little bit of a teaser, that we're working on some case studies at Learning Policy Institute as to what exactly this strong pre-service education and in-service teacher preparation will look like. So getting to the point that you really need to know about, what can you do as federal policymakers and what can you do in states to support social and emotional learning? The first point I want to drive home is that we need to fully fund the Every Student Succeeds Act. This was a bipartisan bill. That means that there are lawmakers across the country who believe in its importance, but it needs to be fully funded at the level that was appropriated, or that was authorized. So we can have both Title II that focuses on supporting educators' learning. We need to make sure that there is funding for the training that needs to happen if we expect the programs are going to be well implemented and lead to the return on investment that I described. We also need to make sure that Title IV, which deals with student supports, is fully funded as well. Title IV focuses on a lot of different things, including technology and advanced coursework, as well as social and emotional learning, but it's currently only funded at 1/3 of the level that was authorized. We don't want to make schools have to choose between having internet for their classrooms and having social and emotional supports. We also need to have an opportunity with the Higher Education Act to make sure that that advances teacher development. Title II, which deals with teacher preparation programs, has a definition of high quality teaching and learning. That is currently an antiquated definition, and if we expect some of the social and emotional teaching that has been discussed earlier in this panel, we need to update that definition to say that high quality teaching includes a focus on social and emotional practices, trauma responsive care, and non-exclusionary discipline. So what can states do? States also have an opportunity to set standards or guidelines for social and emotional learning, whether you call them standards or not. We can encourage surveys and other measures that shine a light on SEL, like they're doing in Washoe County. And this is both for school climate and social and emotional competencies that can be supported financially by states. You don't have to do it statewide in order to build to get teachers really looking at data and responding. You can identify SEL curricula and interventions where you have state support for that curricula, like the second step curricula that Maisha is using in her classroom. And you can also train teachers and school leaders. Like we're discussing in Wisconsin, there is a role for the state to play in providing the technical assistance that schools really need to make sure that programs are well implemented and trainings are well done. Because trainings are not just, you don't just buy it, you have one training and you're done. This is ongoing support that really needs to be sustained over time. So with that, if you want more on the research, we're happy to share it from the Learning Policy Institute, and also any kind of technical support that you might need as policymakers. Thank you.
So we are an enthusiastic group, and sometimes enthusiasm is negatively correlated with time management skills. But we do have time maybe for a couple of questions. We would actually love to have discussion if people are still around and want to raise questions. Yeah.
You had a list of state groups that sponsor or encourage what you do. Does your governor in Wisconsin support this endeavor?
So my governor is in Nevada, and Governor Sandoval does support our social
But it
program.
was the list was from Wisconsin.
Oh, her.
Your list,
Yeah.
yeah.
The governor and the legislature, which is entirely Republican
Right.
in Wisconsin, supported the mental health work.
Well, that's
And this
right.
is
And
part of
your
that.
state superintendent was elected?
Is totally behind it, yeah.
Okay.
We've also put it in the context of our equity work. So the Department of Public Instruction has been very focused on equity.
Thank you.
We've also put it in the context of the equity work. Wisconsin's got some pretty dismal data about student outcomes and equity. And
had some serious problems in Milwaukee.
yes, yeah. So it is all nested in that and has the support.
Only in that, because a lot of the big city school districts in the United States, whether it's Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois, you have some very difficult circumstances to deal with. Thank you.
I would also say with the equity too, that in Wisconsin we have a Native American population, which sometimes gets overlooked, and the equity is very apparent there as well.
Thank you.
I would say also a lot of this is a baby step process in a number of the states and trying to figure out where things link. So that part of the agenda is to support kids' development of intra and interpersonal competencies as a part of the education being provided, very often at the local level, that's research-based, that involves the collaboration of families and community members and schools.
It is, the states went in the background on mental health years ago, closed down these facilities. They expected counties and local entities to step up. They haven't. We do invest a lot in special ed, but at the same time, we have a Secretary of Education who just erased 72 sets of special ed guidelines, which is problematic. Because we built those over time with a knowledge base and an understanding of the population.
Other? Yes.
So I'm coming from Save the Children, and we lead the social emotional learning programs after disasters in the United States, but they're usually for small groups of students, and we try to bring mixed, children that teachers saying having problems, and children that are really coping very well. But I really like what one of you said, that it should be for all the children, not just one group of children. So I just wanted to know how long, what's the duration? Is it all year round? Because ours is like 2-month program, 1-hour session, like 8 sessions.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's every day, all day. It's just built into the natural piece of the curriculum. And when you think about the work, it's how you teach the teachers. I think it goes back to teacher readiness. How do you do that and infuse it across the curriculum daily? So it's not isolated to, okay, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we're going to do SEL. That's not what it is, because it's an everyday practice that they utilize.
Maisha, do you want to say a little from the school perspective?
Yes, from the school perspective, just to echo what she said, we do have it built into our master schedule as a time where we're specifically teaching the skills. We fundamentally believe at my school that as far as academics, if there's something that a child doesn't know, you teach it. But oftentimes, if there's something that children don't know in terms of social emotional skills, you punish them for it, for not knowing those skills. And we fundamentally believe as a school community that it's our responsibility to teach them those skills throughout the school year as opposed to punishing them, because if you don't know something academically, you learn it. And it's our responsibility to teach them the skills that we want them to use in order to be most successful.
I want to thank you for the closing slide of what can legislators do at the federal level. And my name is Rob Schamberg. I'm a CASEL consultant for large urban school districts throughout the country. And what's going on right now, Traci will attest, is you're getting all set up for budgeting for the next school year. And there's a lot of school districts that use Title II teacher education funds to fund social and emotional learning education for their teachers, professional development. And who's providing that? That's being provided by generally young school administrators, people with a lot of experience in the classroom. They come in, and right now, they're wondering if they have a job next year. And it is Title II, the funding of Title II, that and sustaining it and making it consistent that allows districts to support social and emotional learning consistently, and so that the principals in their schools can depend and schedule their professional development. So I just really want to encourage those in the room who have connections to senators and congresspeople to focus on that Title II suggestion that you made.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there is a great deal of research that shows that successful professional development needs to be sustained and ongoing, and that is dependent on knowing what your budget is going to be over the years, having in-house support such as coaches that can keep working with teachers after they get one professional development. And then also, there's a great deal of research that shows how important principals are, and they need to learn these skills too. So if a principal is going to carve out time for social and emotional learning. If they're going to work with not just their staff, but the bus drivers, the nurses on social and emotional learning, they need to understand the research and how important it is, and they might stumble across it, but we would like to be more systematic and make sure they get that training up front.
I would just add, and you talk about the teachers and the principals, I think it goes even higher. It should be the board of trustees, it should be the superintendent, it should be infused from the top to the bottom, right? If we believe it's what's important, it can't be you do that because it's good for you. We believe it is good for all of us.
Yes?
Hi, good morning. I am curious if you are seeing any promising practices around social emotional development in state ESSA plans. And as a follow-up to that question, I'm curious about the role you see the U.S. Department of Education having in the oversight of those plans and the use of SEL as an evidence-based practice.
You want to say a little and then I'll say?
Sure. So I think there are a number of states that are taking up work on social and emotional development. They didn't get quite as much attention because they are typically not using measures of social and emotional development as one of their fifth indicators under ESSA, which I think is a good thing. They're not trying to measure statewide how good a student is at a certain competence. There are, however, a number of states that are using school climate measures, and if you have a positive school climate, that is one of the foundations for social and emotional learning. So it's not named SEL in a lot of state plans, but it's there. And there are several states that Roger could speak to that have done a particularly good job about integrating an explicit reference to social and emotional learning and laying out what their plan is.
We're in the process of doing an analysis of all the ESSA plans to see where SEL fits, and it's embedded in many of the plans, and we want to shine a light on some of those things. And again, what Hanna's talking about in terms of the fifth indicator, we really have felt that social and emotional learning is best done, and we have an assessment work group with national experts and practitioners too. We feel that the assessment side of things is best done at the local level in a formative way. So we actually said, look at climate, student voice is important as something that needs to be emphasized and addressed, and social and emotional learning may be a means to better college preparedness, better attendance in school, better school climate, fewer disciplinary disparities. And I think that when people said, oh, well, what gets assessed gets addressed, so this must not be important, we think that some of the implementation supports and the guidance right now and things that are underway that way, we have to shine a light on that.
And then I'll just add, in Washoe, we have an assessment plan that was actually adopted by our state, and some other districts across the country adopted that assessment. We said when you talk about student voice and how students feel, and you look at the data and the self-reporting, that manifests itself in our school improvement plans as a part of the ESSA.
And if I could just say, we had a research partnership, practitioner partnership funded by IES with Washoe and their amazing research and evaluation department, and some of the work that Traci is talking about developed through that partnership, which is another way this work can be supported responsibly.
We actually have to stop for time because we're a little bit over, but the panelists can stay for a little longer and talk to folks individually. But we just want to say thank you for everyone for this time.
Okay, thank you.